Here are the cast and the characters they play. Thanapat Kawila. Film. As Firida Thanafitak. Pete. A social influencer. He is a reckless descendant of a prominent banker who makes a good living as a social influencer. However, he becomes deeply in debt, after losing money in stock and forex investments, and is being pursued by his creditor. He recalls having a bank passbook with monthly savings deposited into it by his great-grandfather, all the way up to his father, which could be able to solve his financial problems. When he opens the passbook, he is transported 100 years back into the past. As soon as he lands there, he goes berserk, trying to figure out his whereabouts. He runs into his look-alike great-grandfather, Pian by chance, who offers him refuge at his house. He tries and fails repeatedly to convince Pian that he is from the future and is his descendant. Pian is adamant that they are not related, because they do not share the same surname, Thanafitak. While attempting to transport himself back into the future, which turns out to be futile, he meets a girl, Wan, who is curious about him. Based on a damaged family photo he has seen before, he believes Wan will eventually become his great-grandmother. He keeps reminding Pian to only marry Wan, and makes every effort to ensure Pian, who is shy with girls, closer to Wan. He fears if Pian and Wan end up marrying someone else, 3 generations of his family will not be born. However, as he tries to bring Pian and Wan closer, he finds himself developing feelings for Wan. He eventually figures out the way to return to the future. While attempting doing it, instead of him, his great-grandfather, Pian ends up being transported into the future. Because the time travel only functions under a specific, unlikely set of weather conditions, and requires simultaneous opening of both Pian's passbook and his other passbook, which he left in the future, he has to wait for the right time before he is able to travel again. He feels guilty for causing trouble to Pian, and decides to pose as Pian in order to hide his disappearance and spare Pian's daily life of any disruptions. Even though he tries to act and speak like Pian, he frequently loses control of himself or forgets to act like Pian, and reverts to being himself. While posing as Pian, he proposes to marry Wan, which catches her by surprise because the one she loves is Pete. As Pete, he bids farewell to Wan and asks her to accept Pian. He sits for the scholarship test on behalf of Pian, and much to his own surprise, he succeeds in securing it. However, the offer comes with a condition, that he must be married before he leaves abroad to study. He is forced to reveal his real identity and origin to Wan, because she is not convinced that he is Pian. Meanwhile, his and Wan's family has begun planning for their wedding. He has to bring Pian back in time for his wedding, or he will have to marry Wan on Pian's behalf. When another chance presents itself, he attempts to travel to the future once more, but the bank passbook, which acts as the gate for the time travel, is torn accidentally, causing him to be U-turned and returned to the beginning. As his wedding day approaches, he starts having his body parts briefly become invisible, occasionally signaling that he will soon cease to exist, because his great-grandfather is going to marry Wan, who is not the woman who would become his great-grandmother in the future. Based on the weather forecast of a government official, he might have another chance to travel to the future, on the same day of Pian's planned wedding to Wan. He also manages to obtain a replicate copy of his torn passbook from Pian's colleague. Just when he eagerly anticipating the day when he can travel back to the future, and Pian can go back in time to marry Wan, his passbook, which is the gate for the time travel, gets stolen. He has no option but to proceed marrying Wan on the scheduled wedding day. However, the wedding ceremony is disrupted by the sudden appearance of Dumgurn, who is out to seek revenge on him and his great-grandfather. Thanapat Kawila. Film. As Pian Thanafitak. Great-grandfather of Pete. He is a well-mannered, honest and composed bank employee who is admired by people around him. He meets Pete by chance and has to drag Pete back to his house, when he causes troubles in the community, damaging his reputation, because everyone believes Pete to be him. He does not believe Pete when he tells him that he is his great-grandson and that he is from the future, because it is impossible. Furthermore, his surname, Sinpan, is not the same as Pete's surname, Thanafitak. He only starts to believe Pete when his family receives the royal surname, Thanafitak, which is the same as Pete's, since Pete has the ability to see into the future. At the same time, his grandparents are pressuring him to get married quickly, so that he can apply for a royal scholarship to study abroad. He asks Pete to help him find out who he will ultimately wed. Pete tells him that Wan is going to be his future wife, but he isn't convinced, because according to Pete's hints, another lady, Wan Ni, who also happens to fancy him, could also be that person. While observing Pete attempting to travel back into the future, after Pete has figured out the way to do so, he is mistakenly transported, instead, into the year 2020. He lands in the house of Pete's girlfriend, Pink, because the passbook is there when the time travel happens. He tries to convince Pink that he is Pete's great-grandfather from the past, and struggles to adapt to the modern world. When Pink finally believes him, she asks him to help Pete by posing as Pete, and imitate his signatures to withdraw money from Pete's bank account. He pays off Pete's debts and uses the extra money to invest, by turning their ancestral house into a boutique hotel. He begins to believe that he is destined to come to the future to straighten the life of his descendant, and vows never to allow any of them to be in debt anymore. A restored old photograph of Pete's great-grandmother, who would be his wife, reveals her true identity, and he is shocked to discover that she is not Wan, as Pete and he had previously assumed. He worries that if Pete, who is now in the past, marries Wan on his behalf, his family lineage will be broken. He ultimately discovers how to go back in time, but his first attempt to do so is unsuccessful, and he is forced to wait for a suitable day to try again. By using weather forecasting apps, he learns that he might be able to travel back to his time again, on the day he is scheduled to marry Wan. However, like Pete who encounters problem when his passbook goes missing, his hope is dashed too, when he is detained by the police for forging Pete's signature in order to withdraw money from his bank account. As he is being interrogated by the policeman in charge, he discovers that the policeman is actually the grandson of Pian's servant, Chowd. Wanarat. Sandashai. As Wan, daughter of Marquis Banakitkosan. She is a lively, kind-hearted young woman who challenges gender norms by doing tasks that are typically not done by women, and has a progressive attitude on life. Her mother is concerned about her personality, because she wants her to adhere to customs, and behave like other girls. Nonetheless, her father gives her the freedom to be who she is. She meets Pete by chance and thinks he is Pian. She is perplexed, but at the same time, finds it interesting, because Pian seems to have a completely different personality each time she meets him. She finds Pete's eccentric and outspoken personality fascinating, while admires Pian for his well-mannered and calm demeanor. When she runs into both Pete and Pian at the same time, Pian is forced to lie to her that Pete is his visiting relative. She begins to develop feelings for Pete, and finds opportunities to meet him at his home. When Pian disappears into the future, Pete leads his life as Pian, so as not to arouse suspicion about Pian's disappearance. Pete bids her farewell, and informs her that he is leaving the place for good. It is only then she confesses her feelings to him. She begs Pete not to leave, but Pete insists he has to, and asks her to marry Pian as Pian is a good man. While mending her broken heart, she is abducted by Dumgurn, son of an unscrupulous casino owner, who is trying to court her. When Pian comes to her rescue, she recognizes that the person who saves her is not Pian but is Pete. She is happy that Pete hasn't left her yet. Pete eventually reveals his real identity and origin to her. Although she is initially perplexed, it doesn't take her long to believe about his time-traveling journey. After Pete's failed attempt to return to the future, he tells her that part of him is happy, because he is still able to be with her. She begs him not to leave, but Pete is unable to promise her. It is at this point, Pete reveals to her that it is impossible for them to be together, because she would become his great-grandmother in the future. Sarut Vishitrananda. As Marquis Banakikasan. A government bank advisor, father of Wan. He enjoys reading, and has a more liberal outlook on life than his wife. He constantly encourages Wan to pursue her interests, in contrast to his wife, who is very strict with their daughter, Wan. He oversees the government savings bank, and admires Pian for his personality and ability. When the prince offers his bank scholarship for one of its employees to study abroad, he gives him the duty of selecting the best candidate. Even though he personally wants Pian to succeed, he won't favor Pian above the other applicants. Soroka. Watadapan. As Lady Mukta. Mother of Wan. She upholds traditional values tightly, and frequently urges her daughter, Wan, to be like other girls, because Wan, who has a more liberal outlook on life, often acts and does things that are against the norm. Like her husband, she too is unaware of Pete's real identity, and still thinks he is Pian. She excitedly gets ready for her daughter's wedding, oblivious to the fact that Wan seems less than enthusiastic about the wedding. Thanongzak. Supakan. As Earl Pitik Thanakij, grandfather of Pian. After Pian's parents passed away, he and his wife are the two closest relatives to Pian. He resides in a different home within the same compound as Pian. When the royal surname, Thanafitak, is bestowed upon his family, he feels honored and grateful to the monarch. When he finds out that the palace is giving a married guy from a respectable family a scholarship to study abroad, he urges his grandson Pian to marry as soon as possible to qualify for the application. His grandson Pian tells him that Pete is a distant relative of his mother, but after Pian's sudden disappearance, Pete is compelled to reveal his true identity to him. Initially he is unable to accept that Pete is from the future, but is forced to believe him after Pete promises to bring back his grandson. However, he hides this fact from everyone, including his wife, and insists that Pete disguises Pian to work, and to sit for the scholarship examinations on Pian's behalf. As Pian's wedding day approaches, he begins to pressure Pete to bring back Pian in time for his big day. In the meantime, Dumgurn, the son of a casino owner, is outraged and plans to exact revenge on him, after he informs the authorities about Dumgurn's father's opium trade. Parnlika. Wan Mong. As Pen Thanafitak, grandmother of Pian. Like her husband, she is keen to see Pian gets married and have a family, and chooses Wan alongside with another girl, Jaroangjit, as possible candidates to be Pian's wife. Unlike her husband, who eventually is aware that Pete is from the future, she is not informed about this. Likewise, she is also not informed that her grandson, Pian, has been transported into the future, and that the Pian she sees at home is actually Pete. Weichai. Zhang Persitporn. As Chud, servant of Pian. He is Pian's loyal servant who was born and raised in his master's household. He has no life of his own, and devotes all of his time taking care of Pian. When Pian brings Pete home, Pian asks him to take care of Pete, and prevent him from leaving the house. In the beginning, he struggled to contain Pete, because Pete often played pranks on him, in his effort to flee the house. He learns about Pete's identity and origin from Pian. Although at first he doesn't believe him, eventually, Pete manages to convince him into believing his time travel journey. Pantilawin. Pansarithanakot. Lily. As Wanni. She is the shy and demure twin sister of Pian's co-worker, Patty, who has been secretly admiring Pian, and often depends on her brother to provide her opportunities to meet Pian. Based on Pete's hazy clues, she and Wan may be his potential great-grandmother, but because Pete pays little attention to her, he hasn't thought of her as such. Her mother introduces a widower from a respectable background to her in the hope that she will marry him. She is upset when she discovers that Pian and Wan's families are preparing their weddings. In her grief, she agrees to engage with the man of her mother's choosing. Her engagement to another man, combined with Pian's imminent marriage to Wan, will disrupt Pian's family tree, because she and not Wan is supposed to become Pete's great-grandmother in the future. If she or Pian marries someone else, Pete, along with 2 generations before him, will not be born. Supererkbunayanan. As Patty, brother of Wan Ni, Pian's co-worker. He is Pian's co-worker, and is also his good friend. He notices that his twin sister, Wan Ni, is fond of Pian, and often creates opportunities for her to get closer to Pian. He feels sorry for his sister, who has long been admiring Pian, when he learns that Pian is marrying Wan. He advises Wan Ni not to attend Pian and Wan's wedding, because he does not want her to get hurt any further, but Wan Ni insists on going, and even volunteering to help her friend, Wan, on her big day. Nafafan. Jamsayasarikul. As Nakorn. Pian's co-worker. He always brags about himself and envies Pian, who is held in high regard by people around him. When he finds out that just one bank employee will be given a scholarship to study overseas, he is convinced that he will get it, since he has the backing of his wealthy uncle, a casino owner. He bribes a government official, in exchange for a question for the scholarship test. When his plan does not turn out as he had hoped, he confronts the official and accidentally kills him in the midst of an argument. Deva Astana Ayutaya. As Dumgurn. Son of an illegal casino owner. He is Master Chihoi's, an illegal casino owner's son, and he depends on his father's fortune to support himself. He is also the cousin of Nakorn, a colleague of Pian. He gets acquainted with Jarungjit at her birthday party, and begins to flirt with her. When his father learns about this, he asks him to stop seeing Jarungjit, because she isn't from a wealthy family. His father pressures him to court Wan, because he thinks that if his son gets married to the daughter of a marquis, it would be advantageous to his business. He manages to get Wan to assist him in a charity foundation that he is going to establish, and uses this as an excuse to visit her at home frequently, as well as outside. He runs into Pete at a social club and ends up having a fight with him. Since then, he has harbored animosity towards Pian, since he believes Pian to be the person he fought with at the club. He commits a crime, and in order to save himself, he proposes to marry Jarungjit on the same night to use her as his alibi. He coerces Pian's grandfather's servant to spy on Pian, and eventually discovers Pete's true identity, and his time-traveling journey. After learning that Pian's passbook is the getaway to the future, he steals it from Pian's house. He intends to exact revenge on Pete's grandfather, for informing the authorities about his father's opium business, before using Pian's passbook to flee into the future. Siri Pornyukdadata. As Jarungjit. Friend of Wan. She is the daughter of her father's mistress who is often humiliated by her stepmother. As a result of this, and encouraged by her father, she aims to marry into a reputable and wealthy family. She tries to attract Pian's attention, but becomes frustrated when she sees that Wan, who is renowned for her beauty, is friendly with him. Since then, she has harbored resentment at Wan. Her focus changes to Dumgurn, son of an illegal casino owner, but she is unaware that his father disapproves of her, due to her family unfavorable status. She is shocked but touched by Dumgurn when he proposes to her abruptly, unaware that he does so, because he has a motive. As she prepares for her marriage, she is enraged when she is repeatedly being humiliated by Dumgurn's father who accuses her of being a cheap gold digger. On a visit to Dumgurn's house, she overhears his father, Master Chihoi, discussing about his opium business. To exact revenge on Dumgurn's father, she reports about this to Pian's grandfather who in turn alerts the police. Kritityasari. As Master Chihoi. Owner of illegal casino, father of Dumgurn. He urges his son Dumgurn to court Wan because he thinks it would be advantageous for his business if Dumgurn marries the daughter of a marquis. He also supports his nephew Nakorn's scholarship application, because, should Nakorn complete his education and join the government, he will have even more power. His constant humiliation of his future daughter-in-law, Jarungjit, leads to her seeking revenge on him by reporting his opium trade to the authorities. Pongzonyard Winsari. As Jarungjit's father. Pachanukayamsard. As him. Servant of Pian's grandfather who is forced to betray Pian. Maliwan Pantarak. As Lairn. Servant of Wan's family. Watanakumthornthip. As Praisit. Manager of an exclusive social club. Tinsit Hachok. As the prince. Picks Pian as the recipient of the scholarship. Kunakorn Kurdpan. As Prom. Pian's father. Sri Sukham. As Weezit. One of Pian's major bank customers. Ektahon Kumchart. As Chamnan Thamakan. Official in charge of scholarship examination. Angkasamanghan Samai. As Pink. Close friend of Pete. She runs a Thai fabric business who loves everything ancient, and believes she could be from the past. Despite her feelings for Pete, she and Pete remain as close friends. She can't stop worrying about Pete, when he goes missing without a trace. Since she is Pete's guarantor, Pete's creditor is harassing her and demanding that she settle his debts. When Pete's aunt, Pornziri, goes to the temple for a period of time, to pray for his safe return, she hands every documents, including Pete's bank passbook, to her. When Pete's great-grandfather's, Pian, lands at her home, she is relieved that Pete has returned after months of disappearance. After observing Pete's odd behavior, and seeming inability to recall anything, she believes he is suffering from memory loss. When Pian reveals to her that he isn't Pete, but is his great-grandfather from the past, it doesn't take her long to believe him. Because she has always been fascinated with ancient stuff. She finds Pian's serious personality combined with his perplexed looks adorable. She helps Pian adjusting to modern life, and brings him to visit historical sites of his era. She soon finds herself developing feelings for him. While Pian too, is touched by kindness and care for him. Her ex-boyfriend Shaween, who is trying to mend fences with her, is envious of her relationship with Pian. Pian tells her that he wants to go back to the past despite her reluctance. She willingly helps him to plan his journey, in order to save Pete's aunt, who is dying and will soon cease to exist, if Pian does not return on time. Prima Rachata. As Pansari, aunt of Pete. She is Pete's closest family member following the death of his parents in a car accident. She isn't happy about Pete spending much time on social media, and spending so much money on a house and car. After her initial shock and outrage at Pete's huge amount of loans, she calms down and assists him in finding a solution. When Pete goes missing, she and Pink search for him relentlessly, but they find no trace of him at all. She goes for a retreat at a temple and is delighted when she learns that Pete has finally returned. She is unaware that the Pete she is seeing is actually her grandfather from the past. She notices photos of her family in the house are fading and she herself is falling sick, signaling that generations of her family are going to cease to exist. As the wedding of Pete, who is marrying Wan, on Pian's behalf approaches, she begins dying, because he is marrying someone who is not going to be her grandmother. Chitnarong. VZ Sampark. As Shaween, Pink's ex-boyfriend. He is a friend of Pete's who formerly dated Pink, and shows up when Pete disappears, with the intention of rekindling their romance. When Pian appears in Pink's life, initially, he is fine with that, because he thinks Pian is Pete, and is having loss of memory, but as Pian and Pink become closer, he starts to feel jealous of him. He starts to question Pian's true identity. He intends to have him reported to the authorities for forging Pete's signature, once he discovers evidence that the person in Pink's home isn't Pete. Patarapal Kantapoj. As Chanchalard, creditor of Pete. Primradid Ajudan. As Jaja, bank manager, friend of Pink. Jarawatwachir Sarunpat. As Dirakai Chantrakul, a police colonel, grandson of Chud. Namgwenbunak. As Wan, old age. Surazak, Chayat. As father of Pink. Sirinak Paturai. As mother of Shaween. Credit to 131 channel. Thank you for watching.